AT, we're back again. Game week. I love game week, man. I love game week. There's so much talk on Twitter right now about, just that all the stuff, all the news about games coming up. You got Vermont Furman tonight, which should open up the D1 schedule, which is exciting. But just a lot of excitement in lacrosse. And on top of it all, and I feel like for whatever reason, these guys, I don't know who they are, but the whole Lax Vegas lines that we used last year to pick our games, they tweet out the over-unders on regular season wins, and Twitter goes nuts because it's like, It's almost like the start of the season. And everyone's like, yes, it's dialed in. We're finally back, and we're in the rhythm, and everyone's, in their go-to. And I don't know. I just feel like there's a different atmosphere. It's almost like Christmas.
The New York Post needs to step up and start adding a college lacrosse bettor's guide in the sports section.
Did you see some of those numbers though? Did you see some of those numbers? I was fascinated by the numbers because I was confused. Because I'm looking at them, and I'm like, regular season wins. But, like, some of them are, like, so low. Like, you look at Notre Dame. I don't have them in front of me right now. But they had, like,
eight over-under on the wins.
And I'm thinking to myself, 8 wins? So that means they might only have 7? Who's doing this? And then I realized, I looked at their schedule, and they only play, like, 11 or 12 games, which is really weird. And obviously they played some of the toughest, tougher schedule, but I guess those are the risks that you take if you're Kevin Corrigan, right? I mean, you want to save your team for the ACC championships and the tournament, so you schedule a few less games. Your strength of schedule is really not going to change that much because you're playing the best teams in the country, but you're at risk to go under 500 if you have 6 one-goal games, right?
Yeah, I mean,
and you fall on the wrong side of it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that those guys know that they're going to, beat the teams that they should. It comes down to what's going to happen in the ACC. And you and I spoke about this 2 or 3 podcasts ago. Frankly, I have them finishing second in the ACC this year. They played the USA team pretty competitively down at IMG.
Yeah, they look good.
2 weeks ago. They look good, man. And they've got.
But when do they not look good, though? I mean, Notre Dame has always looked good. I mean,
against Carolina in the playoffs last year, Ryan, it looks good.
That is very true. What was it? They lost by 8 goal lead? Is that what it was?
I don't know, but that was one-sided affair. The type of game that you just never really ever see out of Notre Dame. I mean, it's kind of a team that pretty much never gets destroyed. And I think that, part of that reason, obviously, is the fact that they got great players. But let's face it, Jerry Byrne, I think, is the best defensive coach in the country.
Yeah, he's figured it out.
Yeah, he's figured it out. I think that's pretty accurate. And he's, he's got the type of personality where these kids dying to play for a guy like that who's super into it, super organized, but is cool and can relate to these guys. And it's easy to see just from following him on Twitter that he, is more bought into their development as people. He tweets out just as much about, what Notre Dame can do for you after you graduate as it relates to internships and full-time job opportunities, as much as he does the lacrosse piece. And that's got to resonate with these guys. And it resonates.
It does.
And it's just really, really smart. Frankly, I'm shocked that more of these
Torp does it.
Programs don't follow that lead. I mean, it's kind of shocking in a sport where we've said it many times, these guys aren't signing 7-figure deals to go play pro lacrosse. They may play pro lacrosse, but they're not signing. They're not retiring early.
Right.
From doing it. And you would think that more coaches would do what Bernsey does as it relates to promoting what going to Notre Dame, but more specifically being a lacrosse player at Notre Dame can do as it relates to paving your way to getting, a first choice internship job, which ultimately leads you to ideally be able to create the highest quality of life for you and your family for the 50 years after you get out of school, right? And you would think that would be mimicked more than it is. And I won't be surprised if the millions of people listening to the In Your Face podcast today
all 6 people.
And I'm not saying that that the other coaches around the country,
they definitely sell it. They sell it in their recruiting pitches.
I'm sure they do, but they just don't market it as tactfully and as consistently as Bernsey does. So he should be credited that way for sure.
I did like what Torp did. Torp started, instead of, like, you know, how Ty Sanders does the, hey, commit, early commit, verbal commit, whatever it is. I like how Torp started tweeting out the guys' job offers.
Smart.
And I look back at our time at Dartmouth, AT.
That's it. Listen,
it is.
Torp's right there with Bernsey that way, and he's always been that way.
But he's not exactly, his face isn't on social media though, but he knows everything that's happening out there. A little different. But it's I look back at our time, AT, at Dartmouth.
It's really hard to box out. Torp is harder to box out than Bernsey. There's no question about it. Bernsey's a little taller and a little rangier and plays hard, but nobody boxes out the refrigerator.
The thing about Bernsey on the basketball court is he's already psyched out when I step on the court, and I've already won. He's just like, I'm not dealing with this. I'm not dealing with this inside. I'm just going to hang out outside. He opens up he calls his lawyer and gets a new insurance policy in case anything happens. But I look back at our Dartmouth time and I'm like, you know, what was the stat, AT? You always said it. All of our seniors in the time that we were there all had jobs by the end of their senior fall term.
Yeah, for the most part.
And then most of the juniors had internships, or was that internships? I think it was juniors, internships, and rising seniors all had jobs. I mean, they all had jobs going into the fall. It was a really powerful thing. I wish we publicized that. But again, we were there, and Twitter, all of a sudden, you know, it's just kind of starting now. So it's not really like that big. So that's pretty neat. But it's still game week, and we got games to talk about. Vermont, Furman, Mercer, AT. We've got a doubleheader. Vermont plays Furman tonight.
Yeah.
We are a day early, so we're going to try to maintain the fact that we're on Thursday as opposed to doing the show on Wednesday. But tell me a little bit about Furman and Mercer going into their tilts against Vermont this week.
Yeah, I'll do Mercer since they're going tonight. Listen, what people don't know that follow college lacrosse is that Kyle Hannon, the Mercer coach, is just simply one of the best coaches in the whole country. You know, this game is a scary game for Vermont. You know, look at Mercer's record, 2016. They were 5-8 overall, 3-4 in the conference. They just missed the conference playoffs, but they were 4-2 at home. You know, their offense was scoring a little over 9 goals per game. Their defense was giving up almost 11 a game. You know, statistically, they don't wow you by any means. You know, offensively, they lose their attackman, Chris Baxa, 22 goals, 2 assists last year, but they return a preseason all-Southern Conference midfielder in Lucas Wittenberg out of Georgia, stud, 12 goals, 13 assists last year as a freshman. To get that many assists from the midfield as a freshman is really impressive and speaks to his playmaking ability. They also return Chris Rahill, 11 goals, 9 assists. You know, so I expect their offense to put up more than, you know, they're going to improve. You know, I wouldn't be surprised to see them scoring when it's all said and done, you know, 10.5, 11 goals per game. And if they're able to leverage the return of Hank Morgan, Willie Daines, Jack Margiata at the defensive end, all starters last year for a defense that gave up almost 11 goals a game.
Right.
You know, they should be better there. And you got to think that, you know, what was 5-8 this year or 5-8 last year for them, you got to think is going to be closer to 7-6 or even better this year in 2016. And I think this is a scary game for Vermont. That's what I think this is. And listen, Vermont returns a ton, and I know you'll talk about them in a second, but this is a scary game for them. The one caveat for Mercer is they do lose Mike Nugent, their goalie.
He was very good. I like Nugent.
You know, saved 52% of the shots. The incumbent seems to be Tyler Bordeaux, didn't get a lot of game day work, and so he's untested, unproven. They do return Will Meacham, their faceoff guy. He won almost 50%. Man up was not spectacular for Mercer, 27% game. Their man down was a little bit better at stopping their opponent 65%. But again, the key to this game for me is what Kyle Hannon is able to do as it relates to improvement. With the return of so many of his players from last year's roster.
Absolutely.
The concern, and I know you'll address it, is stopping Vermont's dangerous duo of Cam Milligan and Ian McKay. But that's what I got on Mercer for tonight's game.
It's perfect. What about Furman? What about Furman?
In terms of Furman, they play them Saturday, I believe. Furman comes off a really, really tough 2016 season, going 2-11 overall, 2-5 in the conference, only beating Jacksonville and VMI. And Jacksonville, we know, is going to be better, and VMI will probably be better. But what people don't realize when they look at Furman is how young they actually were last year. It's an offense that only scored 8 goals a game. They were shooting 28%. That's just not going to get it done. That's the secret. Shooting 28% is the secret to 8 goals a game. But they return everybody. They're led by midfielder David Williamson, who was 15 and 10 last year, which are pretty good numbers for a midfielder. They returned Jonah Moore at attack, 14 goals, 8 assists. Midfielder William Holcomb, 13 goals, 7 assists. The defensive end, they were giving up 11 goals a game. That's a tough 3-goal spread, RD.
Yes.
To put up 8 and let up 11 on average. They do return Joe Stone, who started all last year. They return their goalie, Riley McDermott, who saved 47% of his shots. And at the faceoff X, Hill Blaze, McDonough kid, was a stud.
I liked him a lot. He actually did very well against us at Michigan.
After the draw, he can play the game.
Yep.
He's going to need to improve on 47%. I think he's capable of doing that. When he, returns a lot of support on the wings, you'd like to see that 47% turn into 53%. That could be the difference of, two more wins.
Right.
And so we'll see. Man up for Furman was actually pretty good, 42%. Their man down stopped their opponent 63% of the time. The key for Furman, I think the key for Mercer is they need to win faceoffs against UVM and simply limit the amount of offense that UVM gets to play. That's going to be their shot. If UVM's winning faceoffs against either of these teams,
deep trouble.
I just think it's going to be lights out because I just think they're too dangerous on the offensive end. So, what do you got about Vermont?
Look, I'm doing a lot of research on Vermont, and I see a team that has the ability to put themselves on the map in year 1 of Chris Weiss's term as head coach there up in Burlington. Look, you've got 126 points returning between seniors Ian McKay and Cam Milligan. Cam Milligan is shooting at 35%.
That's sick.
And the shot on goal percentage is north of 65% for both of these guys. And here's the deal too. They lose Jane Barlow this year, but they retain Dawes Mitchling and Cam Stafford. He's great.
He's a kid from St. Paul's.
Yeah. But the thing is with Mitchling.
Stafford's gone, dude. Stafford, I think, is at Virginia.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
I'm not positive, but I'm pretty sure that's the case.
I think you're right. You're right. But here's the thing. It doesn't matter because in the end, Mitchling is kind of more or less like me playing alongside Nick Bonacci and Jamie Coffin. I'm just always open. So all I have to do is just put the ball in the net. And he's much better than I ever was at it. In terms
shoot
of...
as hard, though. I bet he doesn't shoot as hard.
That's all that matters, I guess. But, I look at this and I'm thinking to myself, this is a team with a dynamic duo. And for Chris Fifes to put himself on the map this early in his head coaching career on the shoulders of these two guys, you can do it. You can really, really do it. Defensively, they've got John Kaplan returning in cage, who saved 54% last year. You've got, sophomore Warren Jeffrey, Ben Cox returning on the defensive end. Those two are going to kind of anchor the defensive side. And you look at the smaller aspects. John Kaplan's a big piece of this because, look, if you're going to spend as much money as you're going to assume that Vermont does in the offensive end, given where their recruits are coming from, you've got to do a lot of damage control in the defensive end. 54% is a pretty good damage control, and if John can improve on that, the entire team improves. If you look at the face-off X, they've got a senior in Luc LeBlanc, who last year went 55%. But the rumor right now is the kid Charlie Erdman is a kid to watch at the face-off X, and I'm excited to see that. And you got a senior who's going to get pushed by a freshman early in offense, only going to make both of them that much better, especially when you go up against, let's face it, there are guys in the country that they're going to see that are just better. The kid from Hartford, Dylan Protesto, they're going to see, and he's probably better. But if you've got two options that are at let's just say 55%, and again, we talked about this on the last show, where, it's a matchup thing. Sometimes Luc LeBlanc might have it. Sometimes Charlie Erdman might have it. That's a nice little combo you can have. The other part is Jake Bernhardt coming on board. He's going to improve the wing play, so you can add maybe 1 to 2% to either face-offs guy's ability to get the draw. But talking to Chris Fifes this year, and his keys to, the season, to this game, personally, I just think they should just run and gun, push the floor, and more so press out on defense. Look, just force the tempo early in the season, cause a lot of turnovers, because when you get the ball into Ian McKay or Cam Milligan's stick, the ball's going in the cup. And so, for me, I don't see a way that Furman and Mercer make it out of this, just from what I've seen from Vermont over the last year and popping up out of quote-unquote nowhere when everyone knew how good McKay and Milligan were. And then, in terms of the season outlook for Vermont, you've got a guy and coach who is trying to develop a culture and a structure and a program in Vermont that has chronically underachieved. Let's face it. Ryan Curtis did a great job doing it. But there's another step to be taken, and I think Chris is trying to do that. Expect some interesting roster moves in the first couple weeks in terms of maybe identifying that culture, if that makes sense. Yeah. Some guys might not be playing right away. But that's not to say that you're not going to see some newcomers coming in. The kid Ben French is a freshman from IMG he's coming from Ontario. Look to him make a push to complement Milligan and Mitchling on that attack line. But I just see a great team with a wide open America East this season. And I'm pretty excited to see what Vermont can do with a new attitude, new culture, and obviously 2 games in front of them that should be winnable games.
What is Fifes saying about their, midfield as a group? I mean, you're talking about running and gunning, and that's great as it relates to Ian McKay, Cam Milligan, Dawes Mickling all being at the end of the break. Clearly that makes sense from that standpoint. But in order to run, you got to have some depth in the midfield. It looks like they're going to win face-offs. It looks like, obviously, we know that they're going to have great wing play just based on who's coaching them.
Yep.
But I'm looking at their stats, and I'm curious to see, Nick Bartlett graduates.
Yep.
As a midfielder that was 11 and 13 for them last year. James Barlow was gone. Cam Stafford transferred to Virginia. Jack Knight, it might be their 4th attackman, I don't know, but I'm looking at their midfield, and I don't see any midfielders. Matt Gudis, I guess, potentially sticks out as somebody that was 8 and 6 last year. Braden Davis 6 and 3.
There's definitely going to be some turnover on the midfield. That's definitely not. I mean, when talking with Fifes, he definitely, acknowledged the fact that the midfield is a work in progress. But one of the focuses that he's done is that's different than Ryan Curtis's era is that he's starting to run more defensive midfield, and the low production outside of Ian McKay at the midfield from Vermont is probably largely due to that very fact. that you are more or less spreading your midfielders thin. And let's face it, if you're not bringing in guys like Zeddy Williams or, the guy from Denver who's not playing this year.
Zach Miller.
Yeah, Zach Miller types that can just really kind of do it all and are slick and, could play defense, play the wings. If you're not bringing in those types of guys, but you're trying to keep them at that role, it's very hard to do. And so I think Fife's his focus is to kind of minimize each guy's midfield responsibility, which should maximize their production on both sides of the field. So it should be interesting again, but Vermont going into these two games, I see a 3, 4, 5 goal difference.
Their goalie's a stud. That's Kaplan, I'm assuming, is going to be the starter probably.
Yeah, Kaplan's at 54%. He's definitely going to start.
He's a stud, man. And he's a one-man clear. I mean, he's scary on the clear when he makes a save. It looks like Jimmy Beardmore.
He's dynamic, and that helps. Moving on to the next one in our docket, Lehigh, New Jersey. Talk to me about Lehigh a little bit, AT.
So I did some due diligence on Lehigh, obviously coming off of a 6-9, 4-4 record in the Patriot League in 2016. They want to improve. Their offense more or less got the job done, scoring over 10 goals a game last year on 32% shooting. But they lose Reed Weber, who was their best offensive player, 37 goals, 14 assists. And their top 3 midfield scorers. They do return Tristan Ray, 31 goals, 9 assists, and fellow attackman Matt Raposo, 16 goals, 14 assists. But who steps up in the midfield for Lehigh?
Right.
That's critical. On the defensive end, they let up almost 11 goals a game. They lose Casey Eidenshank and Trip Telesco, who were 3- and 4-year starters for them. They returned Eddie Buchal and Matt Rimmel. But it's going to be interesting to see if they're going to be able to hold teams below, ideally below 10 goals.
Yeah.
I think they're going to have trouble scoring at the same rate that they did last year. And with the graduation of 2, 4-year players for them on defense, they're going to be a different team on both sides of the ball, no question about it. In terms of the goalies, they returned 2 guys that played a lot last year. Chris Kiernan let up, over 11.5 goals a game, saved the ball at 48%, started 9 games. Adam Sawicki let up just over 10 goals a game, saving the ball at 49%, started 6 games. They're going to have to figure out who they are there. Edge would probably say that Chris Kiernan ends up being the guy down the stretch, but that's just simply a guess. At the face-off X, they returned Casey McAdam. 33% success rate at the X is not going to get it done.
No.
It's just going to kill them. And when they are being redefined on the offensive end, the defensive end, they have a battle going on to see who's going to start in the goal. And they are losing 2 of every 3 face-offs. That really creates a scary dynamic. So you got to believe that these practice sessions are probably pretty intense as people see that there's, a lot of opportunity for playing time out there. And
so many moving parts, man. So many moving parts.
Sounds so much like Dartmouth.
But you know what? You're not wrong though. AT, imagine a couple injuries to Lehigh, and all of a sudden it solves your problems. But it doesn't. Does it solve it in the right way?
Yeah, I mean, listen, it solves it one way or the other. But listen, it's a great school. They've had an unbelievable run the last, 5 of the last 7 years. This has been one of the best teams out there. And so certainly Kevin Cassis and his staff know how to get the most out of what they are able to recruit there. And so, listen, they're going to do a great job. What that translates to record-wise, hard to say. This game versus NJIT, let's face it, even with being completely new, basically all over the field, you got to believe that they are going to be able to control the outcome of this game. And similar to what we spoke about yesterday, I think, like John Paul is saying to his Michigan team taking on Cleveland State, I don't think the message is too different from Coach Cassis as they take on NJIT, which is, listen, play fast, play with more energy. That's the challenge. And, it's a new season.
It's a great evaluation tool, obviously, for as many moving parts that they have, too.
No question. But overall, going to the concern, midfield scoring, where are they going to get it from? Face-offs, how are they going to be able to win more than 1 out of every 3 face-offs, and who's going to be their goaltender? So that's Lehigh in a nutshell.
The other side of this, their game against NJIT. NJIT picks up their first win in program history last year against Dartmouth. And looking at the situation with NJIT, it's very much the same with Cleveland State. This is a team that needs to figure out its identity, and Coach Travis Johnson needs his time to build the program and get the upperclassmen that he needs. It seems as though his roster is constantly changing right now, and that's tough for any coach to handle. You've got Aaron Forster, the Ontario guy, 28 points last year. Bradway and Callaghan round out the rest of the returning offensive leaders. But there are guys on that offensive leaderboard from last year that are not on the roster for 2017. Jesse Rice, Joe Lamelli, John Roach. It's interesting. I don't know any background on these guys. They were sophomores last year. Curious if they left, whatever it might be. But you've got this flex roster scenario that is hard to coach. 25 underclassmen, in the long run with New Jersey, you look at their schedule and you look at what they have coming up, and you've got to think that Travis Johnson is circling a few games. Wagner, Manhattan, VMI, ULO, and Hampton as teams to attack in 2017. And if you're
Dartmouth
looking...
dropped them.
What's that?
I think Dartmouth dropped them.
Yes, of course. They're a little dangerous.
I don't know whether they dropped them or not. I shouldn't say they dropped them because I don't know, but they no longer play Dartmouth.
Right.
And you've got to believe that it's not a game that Dartmouth probably wanted to play anymore. Considering they were going to have to go down to NJIT
right,
this
that's the other part, too. They don't want to go to Jersey. I mean, Dartmouth in general is always looking for home games, as you know, AT. So whenever they can pick one up, they'll pick one up. But you look at, New Jersey and what they're looking at. I mean, with Wagner, Manhattan, VMI, Lowell, and Hampton as teams to attack in 2017, can they double their win output in 2017? Can they snipe 2 wins? Obviously, Hampton looks like an easy win for them. But can they get 2 wins between VMI, ULO, Wagner, Manhattan out of those 4 games? Should be interesting. In terms of Lehigh, it's an evaluation time for New Jersey to figure out what they have, the pieces they can put together, and that's pretty much it. I see this as kind of a runaway for them. We'll move on because it's nice to be able to move on. A great game to finish out the 3 for this, but it's Delaware Bucknell, and it's a great game because it's early season. AT, I love Bucknell, and I love the dynamic that Bucknell brings to Division I, but I think Delaware is going to be a different team. Talk to me about Bucknell this year.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to this game. Delaware always, in my opinion, seems to play well during the first 5-6 games of the year, at least in my opinion, seemingly. I know that they have lost some games as well, but I think this is definitely has the potential to be a good game. In researching Bucknell, I think Bucknell is going to be a scary, scary team in 2017. Last year, they finished the season 10-5 overall. They were 5-3 in the Patriot League. It's an offense that put up 11 goals a game, a defense that only let up 9 goals a game. They shot 30%. Now they lose, a couple of proven goal scorers in Sean Doyle, 21, attackman Sean Doyle, 21 and 18. Thomas Flibbett, who was 17 and 6, but it seemed like Thomas Flibbett scored 25 goals a game for 4 straight years. But they return a ton of great players. At the top of that list, certainly the first-team All-American candidate Will Sands, 36 and 28 last year. Midfielder Tommy O'Connor, 24 goals, 18 assists. A fellow attackman Quinn Collison, 15 goals, 3 assists. Midfielder Sean O'Brien, 13 goals, 2 assists. They just have a lot of scoring, a lot of guys that scored between 10 and 25 points, and then that superstar in Will Sands and potential superstar in Tommy O'Connor as well. Defensively, they lose Eric Monfort, but they return Mike Schiappa, Benny Bourgeois-Norn, tough to say his name, and then in the goal, listen, the 2 intangible areas in the goal and at the face-off X, Clippers' little brother, Christian Klipstein. That's Ryan Klipstein's little brother, right?
I think so.
He's a stud.
Yes.
He saved the ball at 58% last year, only let up, a little under 8.5 goals per game. And then their faceoff guy was a total beast, Jarrett Witzel, 57%. And so they go into every game with, an anticipated advantage at the exit and the goal, similar to what Brown did last year. And they've got an offense that is, very proven, returned a ton of veterans that put up really, really good numbers, including a superstar.
Yep.
They return, most of their defense. And this is a scary team. Their man up was 47%. Their man down was 77%. We all know that Frank Federica just does an unbelievable job each year. I think he's one of the most underrated coaches in the country. Frankly, I'm surprised that, he hasn't been, in the running for these top 5, 6.
I think he has. His name has been thrown around a few times. I just think he's comfortable.
All he does is consistently win seemingly 10 games, and he's right there at the end all the time. It seems like they're always knocking somebody off that's a top 5 team every year. He just does an unbelievable job. My main concern in looking at Bucknell is the fact that they only cleared the ball at 77% last year, which seems like a low number. Maybe that stat takes into consideration that they're clearing against their own 10-man ride during practice each day, which, let's face it, has terrorized Division I lacrosse since Frank Federica has been there.
Right.
They're known as, one of, if not the best riding teams in the country. And so to see them clear at just 77%, sticks out as a statistical concern for me. But I think Bucknell is going to be a scary team this year, and I expect them to beat Delaware this weekend.
I look at a Delaware team that last year started 5 freshmen and 3 sophomores. I don't know how many other teams in the country started, other than, first year, second year, third year programs, that started that many young players. It seems like Delaware has changed their outlook over the last, say, 5 years to kind of change the dynamic of the team. For obvious reasons, they've got a senior attackman in Paul Major. I mean, he was a CAA teamer last year. Steve DeLargy, midfielder. He's also preseason CAA as well. But they have the kid Ro Magnoli at attack, and then defensively, they had kid Austin Haynes, who's a stud in between the lines. He was rookie team on the rookie team, last year. But I think that, for Delaware, there's a lot of moving pieces that are finally coming together in this last year. So you look at the face-off situation for Delaware too. You've got the senior Walsh, the kid Walsh. He was pretty decent last year. And then they got the kid sophomore Hervada. Very similar scenario that Vermont has, where they have a dynamic duo in there. I do like having that if I'm a coach. I don't like, obviously, if you've got Trevor Baptiste, that's one thing. But if you don't have Trevor Baptiste and you're running at, say, 50 to 55%, it's nice to have another guy behind you that is also running 50% because it just gives the team a new energy when somebody else goes out there and gets up and down the field and fights and scraps at the X. So that's good. In terms of the goal situation, it seems as though they have a freshman kid named DeLuca who's coming in, making a pretty big impact right away, which is good because it's pushing the kid Farragon, the redshirt, transfer from Q's, who's finally kind of settled into his role at Delaware, which is pretty neat. But in terms of this weekend, this is kind of an interesting thought, and we don't put too much time into our podcast, talking about this, but we get this kind of insight from the coaches. But they have January term finals coming up, and it's mostly this week. And so when you're trying to open a game for Delaware,
not going to help.
It's tough. It's very, very tough, and not enough information comes out in terms of exam weeks. There's also, everyone kind of knows exam weeks, but there's also that weird midterm time too. The kids are stressed out, staying up late nights, trying to cram for all these tests. So it's just a busy week. But the spring semester starts on Monday. So it's interesting to see that dynamic with Delaware and how they manage their season around their, unique academic calendar. But with Bucknell, exactly the same stuff that you've talked about. They're always a challenge. Every time you don't know what you're going to get, but you kind of do know what you're going to get. You're going to get a slow but fast-paced game with a bunch of scores. They only create high opportunities from themselves. And that's one of the big things is, looking at a Delaware team that has set a foundation over the last 2 years, and it's finally time to kind of take that step forward for them. And it seems from talking with Byron Collins and the staff at Delaware that this is the year for them to do that, where now they have 3 sophomores or 5 sophomores and 3 juniors who, again, much like some of the other programs, finally, like we were talking about BU the other day, they finally have some leadership there. That's really, really important. The CAA as a conference is a monster. I mean, you've got teams that are all relatively balanced across the board. You got to look at Towson as a team to beat in that league. But at the same time, you look at at any given time, they can do it. And one of the cool stats that Byron actually talked to me about was that the CAA champion has made the quarterfinals 2 out of the last 3 years.
Yeah.
And that just goes to show how competitive the league is. And the CAA has had 3 teams to reach the Final Four in its history. There's also not very many teams or leagues that have had that.
Yeah.
And so for Delaware to kind of focus, keep it simple, it's really, really good to see that, the positive atmosphere coming out of Delaware, given the last, say, 3 to 5 years.
Yeah, well, last year it was tough. I know I said that it always seems like Delaware starts fast, and I it seems like they have good wins, but I look at the 2016 schedule just to back up a little bit here. They opened the season with 4 losses, and so it's going to be interesting to see. I'm glad to hear that they feel good about their preseason, but there's no doubt that going into this game on the heels of J-term exams is certainly going to present a unique challenge for the players in that program. I'm sure they'll be fired up and ready to play, but you gotta think that anything that sort of draws the attention away from lacrosse, even temporarily, going into the first game of the year is got to be a challenge for that staff.
It is, and you wonder if in the future they start working around that. Certainly, you already know that there are weird gaps in certain team schedules, anywhere between 10, 14, 2-week gaps. And that's large part because coaches have seen their teams play under that kind of stressful outside pressure from the academic world. And it's interesting to see that they would pick up a team like Bucknell. But outside of this, obviously it's going to be a challenge with Bucknell, but look for Delaware to make an impact this year in the CAA, especially how wide open, just as much as the America East is. The CAA is just there as well. That's it for the show for today. Again, check us out at In Your Face Lax on all the social media. And we will see you tomorrow. We've got the last 3 games coming up. We've got PSU, Robert Morris, Air Force Duke, and Ohio State. And who's Ohio State playing, AT?
Ohio State is playing Furman, aren't they?
Oh, yeah. Running it back with Furman again. So we'll be back tomorrow. In the meantime, maximize your comfort. Thank you, as always, for the listen.
Go Rangers.